morning, everyone, and welcome to a report card on sheltering Kitsap County homeless residents. I want to take a moment actually to honor the indigenous people on whose land we meet today, the Squamish and Squatlin tribes. My name is Ariana Kandu, and I'm a member of the Housing Committee for the League of Women Voters of Kitsap, which is sponsoring this event today. We'd also like to thank Representative Larry Sequest and Leslie Doggs for being in the audience. Thank you for showing. Today's program is filmed for future viewing on Bremerton Kitsap Access Television, a public education and government access television station. A little bit of housekeeping remarks before we begin. So restrooms are located right across the lobby behind the central desk. You'll also find an evaluation form on your seats, and we ask that you please fill that out for the end of the forum. League members will actually collect those forms. And now is also the time to turn off your cell phones or any other devices that might ring, beep, or buzz. Thank you for that. A little bit about the League of Women Voters. We are nonpartisan and do not support individual candidates or political parties. The League does encourage the informed and active participation of citizens in government and also influences public policy through education and advocacy. We are political in that we study governmental issues in detail, developing positions for our members to reach consensus and act on those positions to affect public policy. The League depends on its members to organize and run events such as this. We're very appreciative of your time on a Saturday. Membership is open to all genders, and information about joining the League is actually at the back tables. If you have any questions of our speakers today, a microphone is going to be available on the podium during the question and answer time after all the speakers have made their presentations. Or you can also write down your questions. There are little cards that people will be passing out, and they'll be collected by League members. Today we are very pleased to introduce our moderator for today's event, Kirsten Jewell. Kirsten is actually the Housing and Homelessness Division Coordinator for Kitsap County's Department of Human Services. She manages the Housing and Homelessness Division in Kitsap County, including overseeing strategic planning, administering annual community investments of $3 million, coordinating countywide efforts, data collection and analysis, and community education. She's worked with homelessness and affordable housing programs in Kitsap County and at the state level for more than 15 years. Kirsten is also the chair of the Governor's State Advisory Council on Homelessness and co-chairs the Homelessness and Affordable Housing Committee for the Association of County Human Services. She serves on the Homeless Advisory Committee for the Washington State Low-Income Housing Alliance as well. Kirsten is a lifelong resident of Kitsap County. She earned her Executive Master of Public Administration degree at the Evans School of Public Policy and Governance at the University of Washington. Thank you, Kirsten, for participating in our program.
I found a lucky penny. Means it's going to be a good day today, right? The true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members. This quote is often attributed to Mahatma Gandhi, but I think many other wise people have expressed something similar. And it's very relevant to the work that we do with vulnerable people experiencing homelessness. A home affords us the freedom to flourish, to invest in our children, and to contribute to our society. And without a home, it's nearly impossible to do any of these things. We know from statewide and national research why people experiencing homelessness, and it's actually very simple. Homelessness happens to people when they don't have enough money to pay for the housing that's available. Vacancy rates in Kitsap County have been at 5% or lower for the last decade, creating a very high demand and a corresponding increase in rents. The average rent in Kitsap County has increased 48% over the last 4 years to an average of $1,400 today. And national research shows us that for every $100 that rent increases, we will see a 6 increase in homelessness in metro areas, and a 32% increase in homelessness in non-metro areas. So there's a direct link between the increases in rents and increases in homelessness. In our county, for every 100 units of affordable housing that is needed, we have about 12. And that means that nearly 14,000 renter households are paying more than they can afford, walking a precarious cliff, making it incredibly difficult each day to choose between food or rent, daycare or car repair, medication or electricity. We also have high poverty rates in Kitsap County. Sometimes it doesn't seem like it, but the health department data tells us that over the last 5 years, we've seen about 11% of residents here in Kitsap County living under the poverty level. That's about 27,000 people, including 14% of school-aged children, about 5,100 school-aged children living under the poverty level. So because the rental market is so tight, we're seeing more and more rentals that used to be affordable, increasing rents and pricing people out. These tenants become displaced and then are not able to find other rentals that they're able to afford. And the thing that keeps me up at night in particular is that we're seeing more and more of this among our older citizens, people who are on fixed incomes because they're on Social Security or disability, whose incomes can't and will likely never be able to catch up with the ever-increasing cost of housing. You add all this together, and it's really no surprise that we're seeing homelessness increase in Kitsap County. And let me be clear once again, it's on the rise because people's incomes are not keeping up with the cost of housing. Our data tells us that on any given day in the streets and the woods of Kitsap County, there are about 175 people trying to survive outside and in conditions not meant for human habitation. About 1 in every 180 Kitsap citizens experienced a housing crisis last year, a crisis that drove them to seek help with keeping their homes or getting back under a stable roof. The path from homelessness back to stable housing, to regaining self-sufficiency, and the dignity of full participation in society has gotten very long and very twisted and very difficult to navigate for many people. The good news in this is that Kitsap County as a whole is a leader in the way that we work to make homelessness rare brief in one time. Our social service providers are some of the best in the state, using nationally recognized research to deliver effective services that get people in housing and keep them there. We know what to do to help people experiencing homelessness. In fact, last year, the Homeless Crisis Response System helped more than 2,600 households who were seeking assistance with a housing crisis. More than 30% of these included families with children under the age of 18. Having stable housing again gave them a chance to get back on their feet, back to self-sufficiency, back to dignity, and back to home. And the biggest challenge for our homeless crisis response system is not that we don't know what to do. We do know what to do. It's that we simply don't have enough resources to help everybody who needs help. So today, we're going to hear from 4 different organizations with programs that are working to find more creative solutions that will move people from homelessness back to stable housing and dignity. You might note that the microphones are turned up a little louder today than usual, and this is because the League of Women Voters is recording this to be able to be shown at future times. And in order to be able to adequately capture the vocals for the recording, we have to have the mics turned up a little loud. Hopefully that's not too much of a problem for folks. We really appreciate you being here this morning to hear more information about some of the great work that's going on in Kitsap County, and we're excited to answer your questions at the end of the 4 presentations. Our first presenter is Doug Washburn. Doug is the director of the Kitsap County Human Services Department, and he's the current president of the Washington State Association of County Human Service Directors. He has over 30 years of experience in the field of human services program administration and policy development on a local and statewide level. He's the former director of the King County Department of Developmental Disabilities and Community Service Office Chief for the Washington State Department of Social and Health Services. In his role today as Human Service Director, Doug is responsible for the management of 12 divisions, including housing and homelessness, and he has the annual fiscal oversight of $96 million in local, state, and federal funding. His areas of responsibility include mental health, chemical dependency, aging and long-term care, developmental disabilities, workforce development, Kitsap recovery and detoxification centers, veterans, the Commission on Youth and Children and Youth, the Community Development Block Grant Program, and as I mentioned, the Housing and Homelessness Division. These programs will serve more than 25,000 Kitsap County residents this year. Doug is a 40-year resident of Kitsap County. He's an experienced presenter, a longtime advocate for the people and families he serves, and a really terrific boss. Please help me in welcoming Doug Washburn.
Thank you, Kirsten. I added on the terrific boss part at the end. I told her it's not going to kill you. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for having us here and inviting us. I always love coming to these because they can always fill the room, and they're just great to work with. So thank you to the League. What I've been asked to talk about today is the Navigation Center. It's a new project that we're working on with our providers, faith-based communities, elected officials here in Kitsap County. What I'd like what we're going to go over today briefly, I have between 15 and 20 minutes. My time will come in at exactly 17 minutes, so I can give 3 more minutes to Monica. She tends to go on a little bit. That's fine. Okay. So we're going to go over what is a Navigation Center, who will it serve, why do we need one in Kitsap County, how much will it cost, and what's the county's role in this. So, first of all, obviously the Navigation Center is a homeless shelter, but it differs from other homeless shelters we currently have in Kitsap County because it's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Several of the homeless shelters, the way they're funded now and the way they operate, individuals usually have to leave at about 7 a.m. in the morning, find somewhere to go, and then they can come back at 6 or 7 p.m. at night. That leaves people on the streets, usually in downtown Bremerton or major areas of our county. These are the visible homeless people that we do see wandering around. We plan for it to be between 50 to 75 beds at this point. It'll also differ in a way that it will have on-site services available to all the people. Case management is going to be a mandatory requirement of the Navigation Center and people that attend the Navigation Center. With case managers, we can connect them to services, whether it's mental health professionals, chemical dependency professionals, chemical dependency treatment, health providers, and housing for permanent supported housing. This is not an end, this is just a step that we want to help people to get to permanent supported housing. Also, we have the work source operations and professionals that will work with us too, because getting people a job and helping them reach self-sufficiency is also an incredibly important part of ending homelessness. The center will allow pets, which some do, some don't, but that's an important part for some people. It will allow partners. It will not allow children in this specific facility. Who will the Navigation Center serve? Obviously, people experiencing homelessness, but specifically, this is prioritized for the most vulnerable citizens in our community that are currently experiencing homelessness. These are people with severe mental illness, people that have severe chemical dependency issues, people that have been homeless long-term, sometimes in some cases for years. They've been out there on the street. And these are people that would not otherwise likely get out of homelessness on their own. They need some assistance from all of us, and that's what we plan to do with the center. What are the goals of the Navigation Center? Well, first and foremost, it's to ensure safety. This is to ensure safety for the individuals that will live there and to ensure safety for the community. We want to get people stabilized. We can get people inside and they're not sleeping outside and worried about what they're going to do with their stuff and who's going to mess with them at night and their own safety. They're much more amicable to treatment and entering treatment, and we can help them. It's to build trust. A lot of people have been taken advantage of that are in the homeless community continually. If we can build trust, and good case managers are excellent at doing this, we need to build trust with that community so they know that we're there to help them, not to take advantage of them. As I said, we'll offer treatment and connection to services with the goal of getting to a job, self-sufficiency, and permanent housing. We have case managers that are experts in identifying permanent housing options. There are several options available. So they look at someone, if you're a veteran, your options are going to be different than if you're not a veteran. If you're a male, it's different than if you're a female. If you have a family, it's different than if you don't. These are what these experts that we have available to us in the community that right now can offer people. We want to provide the tools to reach self-sufficiency for individuals. I want to get into why we need a navigation center. This is one of the questions that we get. And one of the questions when we meet with our elected officials, our county commissioners, our mayors, our city councils, they say, well, why do we need one now? Obviously, earlier Kirsten talked about the problem of homelessness in Kitsap County and around the state. Just in Kitsap County, through the Housing Solutions Center, almost 4,000 people were needed help with housing in some way. If we can get to those people and avoid them from becoming homeless in the first place, that's the very best thing we can do. When people do, we're not able to do that, and they slip through the cracks, that's when we need to step in with some of these sort of services. Most importantly for this center, more than 170 people are living outdoors in our estimation every night within Kitsap County. Many people are successfully accessing the shelters now and getting services, but as I said, they have to leave in the morning, and it's very difficult to get them in. Many times it's difficult to get them into mental health services or chemical dependency services. Some people's mental health and chemical dependency issues are so chronic, we need a place that we can help them and provide long-term treatment and offer them treatment over and over again. We have Kitsap Recovery Center, which is a chemical dependency inpatient and outpatient unit. We also have the detoxification center here in Kitsap County. And what we find is people don't enter treatment a lot of times the first time you ask. They might not offer the second or third or fourth, but people do eventually, if they're safe off the street, they're ready for treatment. They get to a place where we build up trust, and they are ready to enter that treatment. The existing shelters don't have on-site wraparound services where they can stay there. They don't have to leave at 7 a.m. They can stay there and work on what they need to work with and become safe. They're not funded for this at this point either. That's why we're going to talk a little bit about funding a little bit. And what we found is people with extremely high needs, they're just not successful without that long-term wraparound service they have available. We've had some successes where we're able to get people out of a shelter into temporary support housing and then into permanent housing, but without that ongoing case manager, we've had cases where people end up in homelessness again. And that's a failure on all of our parts if we lose those individuals once they are in permanent supported housing. So we need ongoing long-term case management. Also, from the governmental perspective, recently there was a court case out of the Ninth Circuit Court, Martin versus Boise, where people were being arrested in Boise for sleeping on park benches and that sort of thing. If they weren't arrested, they were said, okay, you need to move along. That court case out of the Ninth Circuit said, a governmental entity cannot arrest someone or force them to move on unless you have another place for them to go, unless there's a shelter for them to go. If we go to all the people, we talked about that 170 people earlier that are on the street right now, we don't have 170 extra shelter beds. There's waiting lists every single night. So what do? People have to be somewhere. You can't just say move along. Where do they move? 1 block away, 2 blocks away. That's why this is so important now. And why as a government, I know the county and all the cities have been working on this too. We need to come up with solutions. Also, we can't do anything in a vacuum. We can't do anything in isolation. We just don't say, oh, we'll try this and this and this. It has to fit into an overall plan to prevent and fight homelessness. That's why we have that Kirsten is responsible for the homeless crisis and response plan. She works with all the providers in our area, citizens, groups, faith-based organizations, to work on a plan for homelessness. The main goal, which most of you have heard this before, is to make homelessness rare, to make it brief, and to make it one time. That Heading Home is the name of our housing crisis plan, and that can be found on our website. We have looked. Have there been other navigation centers? It seems to be mainly a West Coast phenomenon at this point, but they are going up and down the coast. They're showing some really quite good data depending on where you go. Some navigation centers will have people exit into permanent supported housing at a rate of 40 to 65%, which is great if you leave, and they're staying there for significant amounts of time. That's what we would like to, at a minimum, get that. We also need to talk about how much, as a community and as governments, we need to, and as agencies that will do the services, we need to talk about how much it will cost. For the capital part of it, and that's for the building structures, developing the site, getting everything ready, buying the tables and chairs, we figure it'll be about $1.3 million to get up and going for that. We plan to raise some money for that capital funding from foundations and grants, the Kitsap County Homeless Grant, other local sources and charities, faith-based groups, the 1% funding. There's also some state funding that might be available, and Medicaid. Many of these people are eligible for Medicaid. So those are the funding sources that we'll go for. The estimated ongoing operation funding will be about $1.2, $1.5 million a year, which the obvious question that comes up on this, why is this so much more expensive than the existing homeless shelters that we have? And it's because, as we mentioned, it's a 24/7 operation with professionals there that are available. For the ongoing funding, we'll look at housing homeless grants, private foundations, Medicaid, and the 1% again. So, but what is the role of the county? What is the role of the county? Mainly it's listening and doing public outreach. We've had providers and professionals and people who have experienced homelessness coming to us for years saying this is what we need. So we're listening to figure out how we can accomplish that. We need to work with our cities and the tribes. We need to provide partial funding through competitive process. Excuse me. We need to ensure that legal permitting happens, and we need to watch over the data collection for the metrics so we can monitor to see if it is a success. How will it be determined, the location? We're doing public outreach events right now, asking people. We're dealing with the mayors and the county commissioners and providers out there. We're looking for guidance. We're talking to law enforcement officials, and we're looking for sites that would be appropriate for a navigation center. Through our public meetings, we've already had several location recommendations. There's a list up there that we've had all over the county. People have come up with recommendations. Our main thing we're looking for is a site. Thank you.
We want to hear what you have to say, right?
Is a site that would be on a transportation line and nearby the services. So that's the list of what we have so far. So, as Kirsten said in the beginning, everyone deserves to have a safe and happy, healthy, decent, affordable home to live in. We'll take questions at the end, but I want to thank you for your time. Thank you.
Just one more quick note on the Navigation Center. If you're looking for more information, if you go to the County Housing and Homelessness Division website, there's some additional information, and there's also a place where you can leave your public comments about the idea, as well as suggestions for locations that we can add to the list. So feel free to do that if you're interested. Our next speaker is Bernhard. Monica is the Chief Financial Officer of Kitsap Mental Health Services and has served in multiple leadership positions for several Kitsap area nonprofit organizations over the years. As a longtime resident of Kitsap County, Monica believes that basic human needs such as healthcare and housing, especially for our most vulnerable neighbors, are necessary for a thriving community. Over the past 2 years, Monica has spearheaded Kitsap Mental Health Services construction of the 72-unit Pendleton Place apartment complex, which is designed to serve individuals experiencing chronic homelessness and living with serious and chronic mental illness. And it is due to open fall of 2021. Please help me welcoming Monica Bernhard to the podium.
You know, as I was driving in this morning, I looked at the thermometer on my car and it said it was in the mid-40s. And I couldn't help but think of those 175 people that are living within blocks of here, some miles of here. Many of them are vulnerable, Many of them are struggling. Many of them have chronic health conditions like diabetes, asthma, COPD. They're targets of other people, and they're cold. And that's why we need a continuum of projects to address this issue in this community. And so that's why I'm just very honored to be here today on behalf of Kitsap Mental Health Services and the Bremerton Housing Authority, who is our very close partner in this project. And I'm excited to tell you about the Pendleton Place project. Let's see. So let me just start a little bit by telling you about Kitsap Mental Health Services. So our mission is to offer hope for people of all ages through comprehensive, recovery-oriented behavioral health care. At Kitsap Mental Health Services, we know, because we see it every single day, that recovery from substance use disorders, from serious mental illness is possible, and it's possible for people to go forward and live independent lives as much as possible. We're a private nonprofit that's been around in Kitsap community for over 40 years. We provide comprehensive services last year to more than 7,000 individuals through our inpatient, crisis services, residential, treatment services, and our housing. And we have operated housing programs since the early 90s. So why is this project needed? Well, as I mentioned,
Can I just ask you to, yeah.
Not so easy, is it?
No, it's not. Can you advance it for me, and I'll just let you know when.
but I'll get started. So why is this project needed? Well, Kirsten mentioned that there were 175 people living unsheltered in January. These weren't even the people that were staying in the overnight shelter. These folks were living outside in the middle of January during the point in time count. When we looked at the people in Kitsap Mental Health Services, at any given point in time, we have nearly 3,000 people actively in our services, and over 400 of them report that they are living unsheltered or homeless in the community. So we need a continuum of services. Not one answer is the only answer, but I'm convinced we need Pendleton Place in our community. So what is Pendleton Place? Pendleton Place is not a shelter. We need shelters. But there's a lot of confusion about what permanent housing is in this context, and it is not a shelter. Pendleton Place is also not a mental health treatment facility. It's a very, mental health treatment service facilities have very rigid guidelines, and that is not what this is. Pendleton Place instead is a 74-unit apartment complex. 2 of those units are respite beds, and it will provide on-site supportive services. So people often ask, so what is supportive housing? Is this just apartments out there, or is it something more? Well, supportive housing apartments essentially target the most vulnerable people in our community who need housing and stable services to remain stably housed. Some people just need a limited amount of support, and that's why the continuum of services is really important. But people who are living with chronic and persistent mental illness, it's very difficult for them to remain stable in their housing. And permanent supportive housing works. This is a national model and pioneered in Seattle, but it is honestly taken off across the country. It has been demonstrated in studies in more than 30 cities to reduce utilization of high healthcare costs, law enforcement, social services, emergency services, and housing saves lives. When people are living outside unsheltered, they're struggling. They're struggling to survive. They're unhealthy. And what's the bottom line here? Housing is healthcare. And we're not the only ones to say that. That's being recognized even by Medicaid. They're starting to look at housing as how do we reimburse this, because we know that when people are in housing, their utilization of healthcare costs goes dramatically down. There's a huge return on investment, which I can share details later. But we know that when we are able to provide on-site supportive services for people to help them remain stable, mental health services, substance use services, healthcare services, then they can remain stably housed and they don't need to access those other higher cost services. So what services will be there? It's not just Kitsap Mental Health, and no one agency can take on a project like this. And that's why I said at the outset that Bremerton Housing Authority is a key partner for us. They will be providing the property management, the 24/7 property management services. We'll actually be the on-site service provider, but they're going to coordinate all the landlord services, maintenance, that kind of thing. And that's their area of expertise, so that's wonderful. We're going to be providing the housing tenancy support, so that will be the 24/7 staffing that ensures stability in housing. We're also going to be providing the behavioral health services on-site, and we worked with Peninsula Community Health Services to provide the healthcare services, and we're going to hopefully partner with WorkSource to provide the job skills training that we need on-site as well. So who will live there? Who will be the residents of Pendleton Place? Well, housing will be prioritized for people who are the most vulnerable and living on the street today. They will have a serious diagnosed mental illness, substance use disorder. They may have a chronically disabling condition. They're going to very likely be chronically homeless, meaning they've had multiple episodes of homelessness, many of them homeless for years at a time. It will be people who are living on less than 30% of the area median income, but in many cases these people will have no income at all, or living on ABD or the $197 they get a month. They're going to be people that need supportive services to remain stable in their housing. And they're not going to be required to be a Kitsap Mental Health Services client, because not everybody who meets this criteria is in services at Kitsap Mental Health. Maybe people aren't in services at all. Other people might be in services with Peninsula Community Health Services. So it's not just Kitsap Mental Health clients that are going to be eligible for this. We're going to work very closely with the Housing Solutions Center to help us screen the individuals to prioritize the most vulnerable people here. And I'm glad to see that Bridget Glasspool is here. She's manager of our Housing Solutions Center, and she's done a tremendous job working with the most vulnerable people in our community. But here's an example of someone who could be a resident. Tom is 45, and like many people who develop schizophrenia, he developed schizophrenia in his early 20s. And he was involved in his education at the time, but then he wasn't able to keep it up. So he finally accessed Kitsap Mental Health Services. He got involved with our PACT program, which is an assertive community treatment program that wraps somebody around with a psychiatrist, a nurse, a therapist, peer counselors to get someone stable. And then we were able to get him into our supported housing. And once he was there, he never accessed, since that time, the psychiatric inpatient hospitalizations again. We know that permanent supported housing works. We do it today in scattered sites around the community, but what we're trying to do now with Pendleton Place is bring people together in one facility where we can provide those on-site services. It's also important to remember who won't be served at Pendleton Place. There will not be sex offenders of any level. City of Bremerton zoning and capital operating funding sources prohibit serving sex offenders on this property. No one with violent felonies within the past 3 years will be served. National and sex offenders criminal background checks will be performed. But essentially, we're going to be using the same screening criteria that Bremerton Housing Authority uses today for all of their public housing. This is not more stringent or less stringent. We're using the same screening criteria. We know that a project like this is sensitive in the community. We also know that it's really important to place it at the right location. And we are committed to being a good neighbor. How do we do this? We're going to ensure that Pendleton Place has their tenants remain accountable. They will be signing leases. This is not a shelter. They're going to be signing a lease and they're going to need to abide by code of conduct and visitor policies. All tenants will have a case manager that will be checking on them regularly. And what's really important about this is that when somebody has a chronic mental illness, if you have someone that sees them on a daily basis, they can tell when they've not been taking their medication or they're going downhill or they need extra supportive services. That's why this 24/7 support services option is really important. Here are some examples of the community rules. These are just general rules that you would think are just basically presumed on the notice that we're just going to be respectful of people. But we will be enforcing those rules, and we do that today. They'll also have a visitor policy. So it's going to be, the access to the facility will actually be controlled, because one of the hardest things for people that are leaving the streets is when they leave, they want to bring everybody with them. And that's not something that, we're going to have to be very careful about that. It's also going to have building security, controlled entry, doors will be locked, reception staff, buzzing people in 24/7, perimeter cameras, fencing. But it's not just security for the community, it's security for the residents as well. So we really are trying to create a community where people can finally feel at home and ready to begin their life of treatment and recovery. So we chose a location. It's at 5454 and 5464 Kitsap Way. It's a 2-acre parcel. It's across from Miller Woodlawn in Bremerton, just down from the Baymont Inn. It's near a grocery store, half a mile from Winco, I believe. It's on the bus lines. It's zoned commercial, and it's in an area that the city of Bremerton was looking for the development of more housing. And this is going to be a high-quality facility. I know that's also a concern. What is this going to look like in our community? Well, we're working with the SMR architects who've done this work around the region. And we engaged them probably about a year ago, and they've been working with us on our design for this project. And this is just a couple of designs that they've done in Seattle. And here's the current schematic design. It's not as pretty as the other pictures, but we're not there yet. But we are at a place where we know we have an architectural rendering that makes this site workable, and we're able to proceed. Important to note that this facility will be pet-friendly. Many people that are homeless would rather stay homeless than leave their pets behind, because that is their family. So we're really trying to make this facility, not only the units are pet-friendly, but the entire grounds will be pet-friendly. It's going to be comprised of 36 one-bedroom and 36 studio units and 2 medical respite beds. So we started this project several years ago. It actually started, the brainstorming started when Kirsten convened a group of people, of agencies, to say, how can we bring a housing first type project to this community? And housing first means you don't have to have everything worked out before you get into housing. You don't have to be engaged in services yet. Just come as you are, we'll get you housed first. And then with that stability, then people begin to access those services. This project started several years ago, and then most recently, about the beginning of 1998, the Bremerton Housing Authority, Kitsap Community Resources, Kitsap Mental Health began meeting in earnest about this project with community frameworks. And then finally, Kitsap Mental Health Services decided to take the lead as the agency. So a lot has happened since we started. You can see we've selected our housing developer, that was Community Frameworks, and we've selected our architect, we found the site. We've prepared almost all of our funding applications. We have one left in January. We're in the process right now of an RFQ for request for qualification for a contractor. We hope to begin construction a year from now, and the tenant occupancy will happen, if all goes as planned, in 2 years. Here's the funding plan for the project. And I have to say at the outset again that Bremerton Housing Authority was absolutely critical to this project moving forward, because we had a concept, we had a site, but we needed that initial investment. And the Bremerton Housing Authority and their board of directors voted to approve $3.1 million to invest in this project. And that enabled us to leverage those dollars to also get dollars in the state capital budget, which helped us when we applied for funds from CDBG and from the 1/10 of 1%, which we've been successful. And we recently received an award from the Gates Foundation through the United Way of Kitsap County for $500,000. So we're hoping to have all the funding in place locked up by February of 2020 so that we can begin construction on time. So I just close with this one page. This is actually a quote from a client that's been in Kitsap mental health housing. It says, when a person has no shelter and is cold and tired and hungry, it is absolutely difficult to imagine anything beyond that. Now I feel that I have a real chance to start my life again. I've been given back something I've long abandoned. I've been given back hope. So let's remember those 175 people right now. Let's remember the 400 people that are chronically dealing with mental illness and substance abuse that are homeless right now in our community. We need projects like this. Thank you.
Our next presenter this morning is Ray S. Holt. He's the communications representative for Kitsap Homes of Compassion. Mr. Holt serves as a volunteer staff member of Kitsap Homes of Compassion. He focuses on communicating the mission and the work of the organization to the greater community. In this role, he gives presentations to service clubs, churches, social service agencies, property management companies, and other organizations. He also represents Homes of Compassion at community forums and assists the nonprofit in seeking additional rental houses to lease as shared housing for those who are experiencing homelessness. Kitsap Homes of Compassion has a goal of ending homelessness one shared home at a time. Prior to his retirement in 2016, Mr. Holt managed large apartment and condominium complexes for seniors, including work for a nonprofit provider of affordable housing for low-income seniors. He holds both a nursing home administrator license and an assisted living administrator license. Mr. Holt is also an ordained minister in the American Baptist denomination, and prior to his transition to senior living, he served as a pastor for 3 different churches for 26 years. Mr. Holt holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Southern California and a Master of Divinity degree from the American Baptist Seminary of the West. Please help me welcome Ray S. Holt to the podium.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for this opportunity to share with you about the exciting story of Kitsap Homes of Compassion. I start with a slide that shows the beautiful area that we live in and that we all enjoy. And because it's so beautiful and those of us who have homes feel comfortable, we often forget that there are people living homeless in these surroundings. And so for them, life is not beautiful. It is difficult. It is challenging. And so Kitsap Homes of Compassion began with a simple idea. The simple idea is that we need to address the problem of homelessness so that there will be a future in Kitsap County where all people live in homes and benches are for sitting. I'm sure that each of us can think of times that we have seen people alongside the road or in a park that we know are homeless. Often they're holding cardboard signs asking for assistance. And so how do we respond? Well, there's a whole variety of solutions to homelessness. and you're hearing about some of them today. It's really a continuum. I've listed here on this slide a whole variety from major developments of affordable housing with supportive services to shelters, additional shelters, to rental assistance and home sharing. But the idea that Kitsap Homes of Compassion really focuses on is the last one on the list that I put in bold, and that is to rent homes that are on the open rental market in Kitsap County in order to create affordable housing as shared homes. And I'll be talking a little bit about what it means to have shared homes. And so the goal of, I think, everyone here is let us end homelessness by creating affordable housing. But the specific area that Kitsap Homes of Compassion works in is to seek to eliminate homelessness now, because there is a way to get people off of the streets and out from living outdoors and into stable housing now, at least for some segment of those who are living homeless. And we can do that from existing homes that are already here. That doesn't require a significant financial commitment and the time involved in a development. So that is the particular area that Kitsap Homes of Compassion is focusing on. Let me share with you a little bit about the history of Kitsap Homes of Compassion. It's a fairly new nonprofit, so you may not have heard about it. It was established in 2017 by a group of Kitsap County residents who wanted to make a difference in the problem of homelessness. It is a 501c3 public benefit nonprofit corporation, and we opened our first shared home just a little over a year ago in September of 2018 in Bremerton, and it was to provide housing for homeless seniors, elderly folks who were living in homelessness. We now operate 12 shared homes providing housing for 67 formerly homeless people in this county. That includes some of them are seniors, some of them are people with disabilities. Also, we have a home for Olympic College students and a home for mothers with young children who were formerly homeless. We often forget the different types of vulnerable people that are out there in our community who need housing security. The breakdown on our 12 homes right now is that we have 6 homes that are specifically for men, age 40 and above, 4 for women, 1 home for Olympic College students, and 1 home for single moms with kids. So let me share a little bit about the mission and goals and focus of our organization. Our mission is really to create hope and opportunity, not just housing, but hope and opportunity, as has been mentioned before, by providing affordable and permanent housing. This is not a shelter, again, similar to what Monica was saying, that there is a need for shelters, but this is really intended to be permanent housing where the resident can stay as long as they want to. For some of them, that may be a short period where they are trying to get established, like maybe a student or a single young mother with a child. But for others, this is probably their long-term solution, where they will live for many years. The goal then is to provide stable housing and opportunity. We do have a program where residents have an opportunity to meet with an employment assistance coach, and we are encouraging residents to take opportunities for further education and training and to seek part-time employment if that is appropriate. And our focus is on the people who are most vulnerable. Currently, that includes seniors, the disabled, college students, and single mothers. So our motto, as this slide, and again, I'm putting it up there to emphasize our motto, which is eliminating homelessness, one shared home at a time. So I've spoken about a shared home. Let's talk about what is a shared home. Well, it means that residents have their own private bedroom or a shared bedroom if they need to kind of economize in a nice residential home out in the community. And that's one of the unique things that we provide, is that these residents are living in a regular neighborhood. They're not being separated out into a shelter or into a development that is specifically for formerly homeless people. They all share in the common areas of the house, and therefore they all share in the household responsibilities. The homes are designated for specific purposes, as I mentioned, some for men, some for women, some for mothers with young children. And there is a private bedroom for each mother with her children in the home designated for that purpose. So it's a little family unit in each bedroom. So I talked about what a shared home is. Where do they come from? Kitsap Homes of Compassion leases these homes from the open rental market to be used as shared housing. Typically, we're looking for fairly large homes, from 4 to 6 bedroom homes, because that brings the cost down when there are between 4 and 6 residents in the home. The owners or landlords are informed in advance and agree to the use of the home, and we pay a fair market rental value. We're not seeking rental discounts, which landlords might be concerned about not renting because they think we're seeking a discount. We are not doing that. We are paying full rental value. The homes do need to be near bus lines and services for obvious reasons. And we do consider smaller homes if they might, such as a three-bedroom house, if it has an additional room, such as a den or a library or a family room, that can be turned into an additional bedroom. So I took a photo of one of the homes that we're currently leasing. You can see these can be very nice homes in beautiful residential neighborhoods. This particular home has 5 moms with their 6 children living in a nice residential area. So we talked about the homes, but really it's about the people, isn't it? That's why we're all here. It's about the people who are homeless. And this photo of an older woman she is not one of our residents. For privacy reasons, I can't show any of our current residents, but it's just to remind us that many of the residents at KHOC's homes are seniors. And to think that older people living outside or living in their cars here in Kitsap County because they can't afford a place to live. Just recently, our program director, Joel Adamson, sent out an email to all of the volunteers for Kitsap Homes of Compassion, and he said this: "Yesterday I moved in an 85-year-old disabled lady named Joanne into our newest apartment unit. She told me that she had tears in her eyes when I told her on the phone that she no longer needed to be sleeping in her car." So that's really what motivates us as Kitsap Homes of Compassion, to make a difference in the lives of people. Let's think about those particular residents that we're able to serve. They must be homeless or at immediate risk of becoming homeless. Again, we focus on those who are vulnerable, seniors, the disabled, Olympic college students, and mothers of young children. We do a criminal background check, so there's no violent criminal history. We do not allow anyone who has is on sex offender list, and they can have no active addictions. There's a policy that if they had addiction problems, that they've been clean and sober for at least 9 months before moving in. They also do need to have some income in order to pay a monthly fee. I've listed some of the types of income that they might have up there, and that's why it was easiest for this organization to start by focusing on seniors who have Social Security, or the disabled who have Social Security disability. And they need to be healthy enough to live independently. We don't have support, kind of assisted living kinds of services. Again, thinking about the residents, there is an application process. We partner with Kitsap Community Resources and social workers at the Housing Solution Centers to do the initial intake for us and kind of do some screening and then refer the applicants to us. There is a criminal background check, as I mentioned, And the participants in the program sign a program agreement, but are not considered tenants. They are residents of the home, but they are not the tenants. The organization, KHOC, Kitsap Homes of Compassion, signs the lease and is the tenant. A few specifics from the program agreement and house rules. No smoking or vaping is allowed in the homes. No pets are allowed. There's no overnight guests allowed. And there's two types of homes. The majority of our homes are no alcohol at all homes, but there are a few low barrier homes where drinking moderately is allowed, but there's no intoxication allowed. There is a monthly fee that the residents pay. It covers the use of their bedroom and common areas. It includes all utilities, including television and internet, but it does not include food and personal items. It is on a sliding scale, depending on the size of the bedroom that the resident is in, and whether it's a shared or a private room, as well as the monthly income of the resident. The range is from $400 to $700, so it is a significant portion of the resident's income, and that's why, again, we are seeking either to assist with employment, finding jobs, part-time jobs, or in partnering with other organizations that will provide some subsidy for some of our residents. One of the keys to the success of this program is that we have a lot of staff, and currently all of our staff members are volunteers like me. Even our program director, Joel Adamson, is a volunteer. And probably the key volunteer is the house manager. Each home has a house manager, a volunteer, who meets with residents weekly to deal with any conflicts that may have come up. Oftentimes people who have been living homeless have not had the opportunity to engage in close environment with other folks in a shared home. So there's that kind of communication, group dynamics, and conflict resolution. There's also a need for companions or advocates who will visit residents. Oftentimes they don't have family or friends who are close, so we encourage volunteers to be a listening ear. Maintenance assistance, we have several people doing minor repairs in the homes when that's needed. And then, of course, our program director. So this slide shows a young mother and her child on a bench. And my comment is, for a civilized society, having our homeless on the street asking for help is unacceptable. So let's end this injustice now. What are the kinds of results that come? I've put up there a quote from one of the women in one of our women's homes. I'll let you read it. I won't read the whole thing. But 80% of our residents were previously living in their vehicle or in a tent. The remaining 20% were living in shelters or about to be evicted and become homeless. And more than 20% now of our residents have obtained a part-time job. I will share one man's story. Again, this is not his photo, but his story is from his own experience. We have one older gentleman who lives in a KHOC home in Bremerton. He'd been homeless for 15 years and told us that during that time he had repeatedly applied for jobs but was always turned down because he did not have a permanent address and was unable to get fully cleaned up for an interview. After he moved in, he applied for a part-time job at the Lowe's in Silverdale, and he got the job. He now gets up several days a week, takes the bus to Silverdale, does his 4-hour shift, and returns home. He says, this is a quote, "For the first time in 16 years, I now have a regular job. It makes me feel energetic like a teenager again. This home has changed my life." So that's the reason that we do what we do. We do have plans for the future. We want to fulfill our motto, which is to eliminate homelessness one shared home at a time. Plans call for us to continue opening new shared homes. with some for seniors, some for disabled, some for students, and some for moms with young children. But we also want to kind of expand to other vulnerable populations, including veterans, couples, and immigrants who have applied for asylum. And we want the homes to be throughout the county. The majority of the homes at this point are in the central county, but we do have plans. We have opened one in North County and have plans to open several others in that area. If you're interested in that, please talk with me afterwards if you'd like to advocate for a particular area where you would like to see one of our homes open. We do have challenges, like any organization. One is for funding, where additional shared homes, it only costs about $4,000 to $5,000 for startup costs. But the funding that we really need assistance with is to begin to hire some professional staff, which would include mental health social workers to assist the volunteer house managers. We also need landlords who are willing to rent to us. It is a challenge to find landlords who will rent to the homeless population, and understandable there are concerns, but there's also some great benefits. I have a handout if any of you own rental property and would be interested. I'll be happy to talk with you and give you a handout about the benefits for landlords. And we need volunteers to serve as house managers. An additional thing we need assistance with is partnering with more organizations to provide subsidies or startup costs. But our goal for the next year is to open about 2 homes per month, providing housing for up to 120 people. So thank you very much for your attention. And
We have one more speaker for you this morning, and then we'll have some opportunity for questions. Emily Klein is the HomeShare Coordinator at North Kitsap Fishline, which is a food bank and comprehensive services center in Paulsville. Emily is passionate about advocating for the potential of shared housing to help address our region's affordable housing crisis and to help elders age in our community. She has lived in Washington for much of her life, and she attended Seattle University, where she received her Bachelor of Arts in Cultural Anthropology. Emily?
I'm so happy to be here today. Thank you all for being here. It's wonderful to see members of our community who are engaged, who care about these issues, and who are showing up. And I also want to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this forum. It's really exciting to see all the energy that folks are bringing to solving this issue in our community. Many of you may know of Fishline as a food bank, but may not know that we also offer a number of other supportive programs for the larger community. And one of those is the HomeShare program. And I'd like to start with a story about HomeShare. Renee is a preschool teacher in her late 50s. She has an absolutely contagious smile, and she loves woodworking and eating. Last fall, Renee found herself on the brink of homelessness. Her landlord had decided to sell the home she'd been living in for many years, and she could not find a new place that she could afford. Meanwhile, Linda, who is a Sunday school teacher and avid gardener in her early 70s, had found a place to rent, but she couldn't afford it on her own. And as we've heard from the other presenters, and especially from Kirsten's summary, Renee and Linda are not unique. With an extreme rise in rental prices around the region, we are seeing people from all walks of life struggling to afford housing. Seniors, people with disabilities on a fixed income, college students, and also working professionals are really struggling at this time to find housing that is affordable for them. So I won't dwell too much on the next slide because Kirsten already covered a lot of this. But I want to mention that about half of renters in our county are considered cost burdened. What that means is that they're spending more than 30%, and in many cases, more than half of their income on housing. And as you can imagine, that puts people in an incredibly vulnerable position of, in many cases, being one paycheck away from homelessness. But people in the rental market are not the only ones who are dealing with housing insecurity in our community, or dealing with housing that is inadequate, unsafe, and may not meet their needs. There are many people who are house rich but resource poor, which means that wages and earned benefits like Social Security are not keeping up with the cost of living. And particularly for people who are on a fixed income or who are retired, the cost of housing, mortgage payments, property taxes, heating and cooling a home, and maintenance of that home can quickly add up and put them at risk of foreclosure, or even if they're not going to lose their house, they may have to be making those difficult decisions about whether to pay to keep the lights on or to pay for medications that month. So we're seeing many people, particularly elders in our community, living in situations that are not healthy, that are not sustainable. We've seen big systemic changes that have accumulated over decades. People are living in larger and larger houses. We have seen in the past 40 years or so a doubling of square footage per person in the home. So now the average home contains about 1,000 square feet of space per person, which I don't know about you, I don't need that much space in my house. And this has created the effect of increasing costs, because a bigger house is often more expensive, so people are paying more in mortgage and property taxes. They are paying more to heat and cool their homes. These homes are also farther apart, often in car-dependent locations, where you can't walk to the coffee shop, you can't walk to the library, you can't walk to the grocery store. And especially as people become less mobile, that means that they're living in increasing isolation, which isn't the problem just on the level of being lonely and not having people to talk to, which is a big problem even for those of us who are introverts. If you're living in an isolated manner, you are not living in a healthy way. It is also a big health risk, especially for people with disabilities, especially seniors, to be alone, to not be able to go out their door and encounter a neighbor, to not be able to access fresh groceries, to not be able to access doctor's appointments. That is a huge problem. So the HomeShare program has the goal of addressing both sides of the housing insecurity equation. For people who are struggling in the rental market to afford market rate rents, and for people who may be stably housed but struggling to meet their expenses, or even if they're financially stable, struggling to get by, struggling to live a healthy, vibrant, connected life. As some of our other speakers have mentioned, we really need new solutions for addressing homelessness, for helping people to get off the streets. But we also need the ability to prevent homelessness in the first place. And shared housing is part of that equation in that it helps catch people before they fall into homelessness. And we do that by connecting with people with housing that already exists, much in the same way as was mentioned with the Homes of Compassion model, where we are looking at housing that has already been built in the community. Shared housing connects people with folks who may have extra space in their homes available to rent, and it provides that connection between people who may have that space and people who are in need of affordable housing. This is a community-centered model. So we are reaching out to members of the community and helping to inspire them to open their homes and to really be empowered to address this critical issue right away. by allowing members of our community to step in and do something about this without having to wait for new affordable housing to be built. So what are some of the benefits of shared living? Has anyone here ever lived with a roommate? Show of hands. Most people. Who here is currently living with roommates or with family or in some type of shared housing situation? So a lot of people here. And it can be a challenge. As anyone who has ever shared housing with another human being knows, there are always things to be worked out. There can always be conflict. Many of us wish for more independence and think, wow, if I could only live alone, I wouldn't always have to be picking up after someone. I wouldn't always have to be doing someone else's dishes. And that is compelling. There are many good reasons why people enjoy living alone. But I'm here to tell you that the benefits of shared living far outweigh the costs, even if it doesn't always feel that way. So first and foremost, cost savings are a huge benefit to shared living. For people in today's rental market and for homeowners who are struggling to meet their expenses, those cost savings can mean the difference between an insecure, vulnerable existence and a stable and thriving one. People who are renting space, maybe they're young professionals just starting out, they have an opportunity, instead of spending most of their income towards rent, to build savings, to work towards higher education, to work towards maybe one day owning a home of their own. For people who may be homeowners, they have a chance to invest in their home, they have a chance to afford nutritious food, and to do some of those enrichment activities that make life fun rather than spending all of their money just on their mortgage payment. There's also mutual help. It can be hard to live alone, or even if you're in a couple, especially as folks age, it can be hard to maintain a house and garden. Having shared living allows us to help offset some of those burdens and some of those challenges of caring for a home. Maybe you hate vacuuming, but your housemate loves it. Maybe you are a total disaster in the yard, but you find a roommate who has a green thumb and makes your garden bloom. There are many opportunities to enrich one another's lives in this way. There's also a sense of security and safety that comes from having someone else there. Having someone present in the home when you're away, having another person there in case of a medical emergency, and just having someone there to talk to, having someone there to say hello, to check in about your day, having someone there who knows that you exist and can check in with you. Even for those of us who are introverts, having that little bit of social interaction and companionship can make the difference between surviving and really thriving in the home. It also fosters community. As people have lived in our increasingly isolated little worlds where we have just our apartment or our house, we have lost some of that sense of vibrant communities where neighbors know one another, where people share meals together, where people are familiar with one another's lives. And that brings its own challenges, but it is also incredibly, it's a much richer way to live, even when you're dealing with people in all their complexity. So why HomeShare? HomeShare programs are a new approach to a very old solution. People have been sharing housing for a really long time. What's different now is that it isn't a common practice. We don't have boarding houses in our cities anymore. It's less common for people who are unrelated to share housing. So the HomeShare program provides a supportive structure that helps people imagine a safe and secure way in which they can share housing with people who they don't know. Craigslist is fine for those who are adventurous and extremely flexible and willing to take a chance, but as everybody knows, there are a lot of issues that can come up in housing. Has anyone here ever not had a disagreement with someone they live with? Show of hands. Okay, so no one. So the reason that we have a home sharing program is that we provide some of that support that helps people set up a shared living situation that is going to be safe, is going to be secure, and is going to provide some of that compatibility and ease that comes from living with someone with whom you are well matched. Our application process gives our participants the opportunity to build a custom profile where they talk about their desires, their needs, their personalities, their quirks, and their goals for shared living. So we take that information and we use that to connect people who we think will be able to share housing compatibly. We also do background and reference checks on each of our participants, both home providers and home seekers. We conduct in-person interviews and visits of the home that is being offered. We also provide access to home sharing agreements. It is like a lease, but it is much more detailed, and it gives people the opportunity to spell out in writing expectations, house rules, and obligations so that there isn't ambiguity. And if there is a disagreement, people can refer back to that original contract to look at what the terms are. And our participants become part of a supportive community. We provide referrals to other resources. We can help connect people to other resources that are available at Fishline through Kitsap Community Resources, through the Dispute Resolution Center, which helps provide mediation in cases where people may need a little extra support to work through their differences, and many other supportive services. Other communities around the world and around the nation have successful home share programs. This has been done in Vermont for more than 40 years. They have several programs statewide that have seen remarkable success. California also has several home sharing programs. And they, in response to the Paradise Fires, they actually used the home share model to provide successful emergency rehousing for many people who had become displaced as a result of those fires. Right here in Washington, Shared Housing Services in Tacoma has a very successful program, and they have special programs for seniors, for college students, and for veterans. There are also programs in Dallas, in Denver, in Portland, Oregon, Detroit, and many other cities around the nation. I'd like to conclude with the ending to the story of Linda and Renee. They both came to Fishline to apply to the HomeShare program to look for a solution to their housing predicaments. They happened to come in on the same day, and our HomeShare coordinator at the time thought, these two seem like they might get along. So she put them in touch with one another, and through an initial phone call and then an in-person meeting at a local coffee shop, they discovered that they had a lot in common, from their love of gardening to their preference for a clean and quiet home. And they decided to give home sharing a try. They moved in together about a year ago, and they have been happily sharing a home ever since. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers. As you can tell, there's a lot of exciting new ideas that we're trying out here in Kitsap County to make sure that we have a really broad array of different types of housing opportunities for people who are experiencing housing instability or homelessness. We'd like to now invite questions from all of you. You can ask questions of our presenters and their program specifically. You can ask questions generally about homelessness. And I do have a couple of questions that have been submitted on cards. If you prefer to write your question on a card and submit it to us, we'll get it to the most appropriate person to answer the question. If you're comfortable coming up to the microphone, we'd love to have you do that as well. Both things are fine, and maybe we could sort of start forming a line of people over here who want to come up to the microphone. So a couple of questions have come up so far. One is that I mentioned a Kitsap County Housing and Homelessness website somebody's interested in knowing what the address for that website is. It can be found at www.kitsapgov.com, but then you have to navigate to the Human Services Department and then Housing and Homelessness Division. One thing that works well is to just go to your internet search engine and type in Kitsap Housing and Homelessness, and I think our website comes up one of the top hits for that. And last, you can find the address on the bottom of some of the handouts that we put in the back of the room. There's a place where it'll list the web address where you can find a document that was made available, and that's a good way to get to the website also. There's also a question about where the video will be available that is being recorded today by the League of Women Voters. That will be on the League of Women Voters website at www.lwv-kitsap.org. Next question we have is, how does a family get help? And who do they contact? This is a great question. In Kitsap County, we have a one-stop referral service for people experiencing housing and homelessness, housing insecurity and homelessness. It's called the Housing Solutions Center. It's a program that does an intake, a referral, a basic assessment, and then refers people out to the most appropriate housing option for them. They also do all of the referrals for shelters in the community. They have offices in Bremerton, Port Orchard, Hallsbow, and Bainbridge Island, and you can also call to ask for an appointment. If, again, you go to your web browser and you type in Housing Solutions Center, the website will come up for that, and it will list all of the different locations. And we also have all of those contact locations and phone numbers on the Kitsap County Housing and Homelessness Division website. So that's where we direct anybody who's experiencing housing insecurity or concerns or homelessness and wants to get connected with resources. Are there any other questions that people want to come up to the podium and ask this time? So the question is, where else in Kitsap County has this program been presented? Has it been in every regional library or where? And how often is it presented? I think that's actually a question I'll have to ask of the League of Women Voters. To my knowledge, this collection of speakers has not come together before in the past. And I don't know that there's a plan to bring this particular group together again. Would someone from the League like to speak to you? But it has been videoed, and it will be available on the League of Women Voters website. So if you'd like to share this information with other folks in the community. I know that all of the presenters are also generally available to come and talk to groups about their programs, as am I. So if you heard a presentation that you think would be good for your group to hear, I think all of the presenters are happy to go and share that information with other groups as well. Yes. Can you speak up so we can hear you?
Can you explain to me the operation in Kitsap County that are self-governing rather than just self-managing? The reason I ask, I'm in the village of Oregon, and we have had over 1,000 alumni graduate from our own operation. We have found the success of it being self-governed, not self-managed.
So the question was whether Kitsap County has any programs that are self-governed versus being self-managed. And the gentleman was saying that he has been working with a group called Dignity Village in Oregon that has had over 1,000 people involved in that program. Is that right? Over 1,000 who have graduated from the Dignity Village program in Oregon. To my knowledge, we don't have any programs currently that are self-governed at this time. That's definitely something that I know there's conversations about in our Tiny Village program that is being worked on, but at this time I don't think that we have any that are actually self-governed. Did you want to add something, Mayor Wheeler?
Yeah, so in the city of Bremerton, the Oxford houses and the Benedict house are self-governing.
So we'll alternate questions from the podium with questions that come up on cards, so still feel free to give your cards to League of Women Voters, and we'll alternate.
Hi, I have a question. A lot of folks with addiction problems or mental health problems don't have access to very good legal services when they get in trouble. And I've noticed everything says that if you have a sexual assault conviction or any kind of major felony, that pretty much everything is not open for housing. So where do these people go for help? I mean, everybody thinks that the public defenders are going to be able to provide great legal services, and they're overwhelmed. And it's not like being a rich person when you get in trouble. So that's one question I have. And the other question, has all the publicly owned vacant properties throughout the county been looked at for the navigation center to help you lower the costs of that instead of having to go out and purchase property?
I can do the navigation center one first. All the mayors and the city councils and the county commissioners did poll a year ago. All the public properties that were available within Kitsap County, and we have looked at that. We haven't found a location that we can utilize yet, but we did poll that list.
And then I think your second question was about what legal services are available for people. Is that right?
No, it's what happens to people after they've been convicted and are now homeless. What do we do to help them? I mean, people don't have to live in the woods because they had a sexual assault conviction. I mean, we need to figure out how to keep them safe too.
Right. Maybe I'll start with that. I really do appreciate your question. It's a very challenging issue. I know that there's a couple of different options that are available. I mean, I can't speak to the legal services. I do know that Kitsap Legal Services is out there. But I know that the Housing Solution Center, when they have folks that come through that have a significant criminal background, or maybe there's a sex offender history, they work with landlords in the community that will work with individuals with that type of history. So it's not like there's no options available. In our particular situation, the challenge is that the government funding does restrict that. So, for example, the investment for the Pendleton Place project for 72 units, we're using what's called a project-based voucher, which is like a Section 8 voucher. And right there, just it's HUD funding, and it restricts any placement of people with sex offender history. But the actual, if somebody has a criminal background, what we have the option to do, we look at folks and we say no criminal history not criminal history, no violent criminal history in the last 3 years. But we also have the opportunity to look at that and see, has that person taken steps to address that issue? I mean, it's not totally black and white, so we have some flexibility. That's what the Bremerton Housing Authority does today. They're able to look at those situations and see if individuals have taken some steps to address some of the circumstances that led to that conviction. But the sex offender history is that's the challenging one, and thankfully we do have some landlords in this community, but it's a gap, and you've raised an important gap. So
And I would say that's definitely one of the hardest situations to assist somebody with housing. And part of it is because there is often such a community pushback about sex offender housing. You've probably seen some articles in the newspaper. And I think it is one of the really big challenges for our community, and it's a big challenge for every community. How do we make sure that everybody has the opportunity to have safe, decent, affordable housing, but at the same time, how do we make sure that people in the community feel like they're going to be safe? I don't have a good answer for this one. would be happy if somebody has a great proposal that they're interested in talking with us about how we could come up with something that it provides more consistent housing for people who have sex offense histories. Emily, did you want to?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to that briefly. So many times I receive applications to the HomeShare program for people who I don't feel comfortable recommending to move in with a home provider. However, because I work in a larger organization that exists to serve the most vulnerable people in our community, I can take a walk down the hall to our case manager and say, hey, I have this person. Do you know anyone who might be a good roommate for them? The other day, a colleague of mine was talking about a gentleman who has been pretty stable, has a criminal history, but is working, doing really well, and his roommate had to move out. So in those types of situations, I could recommend someone who I may not feel comfortable recommending to the average home provider, but I can say, hey, I know this person who also has a criminal history who maybe could team up with this person to help make rent. So I'm able to provide some of those informal referrals and connections between people who may not be served by the larger program model, but may be able to join forces and combine their incomes to rent a place, even if they do have a criminal background.
I think the other thing I would point out is there is some advocacy work being done at the state level to try to make it so that landlords cannot discriminate against people based on having a criminal history. There was an initiative last year or a couple years ago around this on employment, so that employers couldn't discriminate against people right off the bat on the application. As they're like, do you have a criminal history? People check the box, their application goes in the trash. So that was very successful, that advocacy work, and so now employers, I think, aren't allowed to discriminate against people just because they have a criminal history. And I think that there's some work going on at the state level to advocate for that also being the case for landlords. I don't know the status of that, but if you're interested in it, that might be something to look into. We also have some great groups working here in Kitsap, such as Civil Survival, that really is advocating for more rights of people who have moved out of jail and back into the community. So trying to figure out ways that they can integrate into society and we can end the discrimination of people just because they have served their time and are ready not to re-enter society. Other questions from folks who want to come up to the podium? Do you want to come up?
I don't know how coherent this will come out because I haven't written it down, but you all have been excellent speakers about what you have to say. And a lot of you seem to need volunteers or help. And I wonder if, since this is the first time you've all gotten together, if you've ever, and you may be miles ahead of me on this, but if you've ever reached out to high schools, like the counseling departments maybe, because a lot of those students have to have, or they're putting together some kind of resume that includes volunteer work. I don't know that they would leap right into a presentation and say I'll volunteer, but they're definitely thinking about it, and maybe it won't all be great people that volunteer. So.
Yeah, thank you so much. And obviously, in addition to the 4 wonderful programs that are represented by people here on the stage today, Kitsap County is really blessed to have a lot of other programs that are serving people who are very vulnerable and experiencing homelessness. We do have a handout in the back that's called How to Help People Living Homeless, and it lists a lot of different opportunities and ways that you can volunteer with organizations, you can donate things, you can donate money, you can advocate for the programs that they're working on. So those are all available on the back table if you're interested. And I know that there are some high school service clubs who have been involved in efforts to create hygiene kits or do food drives or things like that as well. Do any of the other speakers want to speak to that directly?
Yeah, I know with our project, the Pendleton Place, part of the construction, obviously we're going to use professional contractors, but we're also going to partner with a organization called, I don't know if it's an organization or a program called Youth Build. And so obviously they can't do the construction work on the site, but we're looking at whether or not they can help build a shelter, like an outdoor sitting area or something like that. So we want to partner with them. Obviously that's kind of more of a one-time, and volunteering on a regular basis there is not quite as workable in our type of project, but we want to find a way to integrate youth with some part of the construction that's appropriate.
Do you want to come up?
I have a fairly loud voice. Is it okay if I do it from here?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? It would be great if you could come to the podium so that it's on the film. Otherwise, it's weird.
My question has to do about the youth, like the high school youth in the area. Has it increased, or what is the status basically of homeless youth, like in high schools and stuff, and in maybe comparison throughout the state?
Great question. I know that we have statistics on this. We do collect information in a couple of different ways about youth homelessness. One is that each school district collects information about youth and families that they have identified who are experiencing homelessness, and that information is then reported to the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction at the state level, and then that information is made publicly available. So the OSPI website has statistics on youth homelessness by school district. We also have some of that information summarized in some of our data sheets that we produce in our division. I don't have those with me today. I think what we've seen in general is the homelessness that's reported in the school districts has been increasing. The other way that we collect information about youth homelessness is through our community partners that serve youth. So we have a particular, when I mentioned the Housing Solutions Center, which is our coordinated entry for people experiencing homelessness and housing instability, that program also partners with the Coffee Oasis to offer youth coordinated entry program. So any youth specifically who feel more comfortable going to Coffee Oasis can enter there and access all of the same referrals and services that are available to others. And so Coffee Oasis is the one who's collecting data about youth homelessness for the youth who are seeking services. I think one of the big challenges, particularly with youth homelessness, is that a lot of youth are not feeling comfortable seeking assistance and seeking services. And so we know that that is a significant undercount. Some youth are experiencing homelessness because they've had bad experiences with other kind of authority or other systems of care or with their families, and so they have a lot of concern about reaching out to try to get assistance. Coffee Oasis and others do some really good outreach to try to reach these youth and build trust relationships so that they're willing to come in and access services, but it is a really big challenge for our county as well as all of the other counties. If you would like to follow up with me directly, I can point you to some statistics around youth homelessness that we do have, knowing, of course, that those are in other counties.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had is regarding the opioid dealings that our Attorney General is dealing with, I guess, at least one of the pharmaceutical companies. It's on the news, so I'm taking that. We'll be getting some funding from that, right? We'll get a payment or whatever you call it.
We may, depending on how the lawsuit comes out. The counties and cities may get a little bit of funding for it.
I was wondering if some of that, I know they'll probably push some of that hopefully back into treatment, but how about for housing also then, because now that's an interesting aspect, saying that it's part of healthcare. And if you don't have, a home, it's kind of hard to say, well, and I understand that really well. So that was, I guess, kind of like a suggestion in a way to
We can pass that along. And typically when there's special funding pockets that come like this to the cities, the municipalities, or the county, the elected officials will set up a citizens advisory board to turn the recommendations on.
Okay, well, that's just kind of a suggestion at this point, too. Thank you, thank you.
I have a couple more questions on cards that we'll try to answer. So one audience member attended one of the Navigation Center public meetings that we had last week and the week before. And at that meeting, I had mentioned that I was going to try to visit one of the navigation centers on a trip that I was taking to California. And she asked, or he or she asked, if there was any information that I gathered at that about the use of emergency services by people at the Navigation Center. Unfortunately, I was not able to arrange that tour on that trip, so I didn't get information at that time, but I'm going to continue to try to reach out to other navigation centers to gather information. We don't want to invent the wheel, right? So we want to find out what they've done that was successful, how we can improve on that success, what kinds of things that they've been doing have been decreasing uses of other kinds of emergency services. So we'll be definitely doing some more outreach to other navigation centers, including the one in Seattle and the one, I think there's one in Portland and then another in California. So I don't have an answer on that one yet. Anybody else want to come to the podium?
Larry Seacrest. I've been having the pleasure of working with the League in Pierce County, looking at our overall homeless response. It's very nice to see all of these enthusiastic, thoughtful programs. You know, I can just imagine all the volunteers and the hours it's taking to get you here. My question is, across the county, what is the current state of coordination? Frankly, what we see in Pierce County is wonderful informal coordination among dozens of service providers, and the opposite at the formal level. The county's staff, the relationship with the state is really not highly functional. Where are you in overall managing where the money goes, helping make sure that the net effect of all of these agencies, government and private, is effective?
Excellent question. Thank you. And I'm assuming that you're the one who wrote this card with
Yes.
that. Okay, I was going to get to that. I just was trying to trade off. So one of the roles of the Housing and Homelessness Division is to try to coordinate community efforts around homelessness to make sure that we are both informally and formally coordinating efforts as best as we can. We have a very active Housing and Homelessness Coalition in Kitsap County that meets monthly and includes several different subcommittees working on specific topics. That is a really active group. We've been having 40 or 50 different organizations or different people attend those meetings over the last several months, and the attendance has been actually growing. So I think sometimes the most valuable thing about those meetings is all of the informal conversations that are happening between the meeting topics and before and after the meeting. So there's, in Kitsap as well as it sounds like in Pierce County, a very high level of informal coordination. I want to touch on just a couple of other ways that we do some more formal coordination. One is through our coordinated entry program, the Housing Solutions Center. They have an advisory board which is made up of all of the different organizations which they make referrals to. And so that group meets regularly as well to make sure that all of the different types of shelters, or all of the different shelters that are serving people are coordinating and communicating together to make sure that we're providing a very consistent level of care to folks no matter what shelter that they go to. They're also talking about trends and different populations and different needs as they're evolving over time so that we're continually evolving our programs to respond to the latest needs. At the government level, I would say that we have a very good relationship with our service providers. One of the things that we've started doing this year is having quarterly meetings with all of the organizations that we grant funding to make sure, again, that we're coordinating our efforts, that we're having good communication, that everybody's on the same page. And we've been talking a lot about performance measurement and how we're all required to report on the same kinds of performance metrics. We've been providing data on a quarterly basis to those organizations, again, making sure everybody's working together. Our division coordinates really closely with the Department of Commerce Housing Assistance Unit, which is the government entity in the state that oversees homeless programs. I'm on the advisory committee for the Housing Assistance Unit's Balance of State Committee, which is all of the smaller counties in the state are part of a balance of state, means the ones that don't receive their direct entitlements or direct funding from the federal government. So we work really closely with the Department of Commerce. And then I also have a pleasure of working with a lot of our state agencies on the issue of homelessness. There's a state advisory council on homelessness where all of the agencies at the state level that interact with homelessness meet together to try to figure out how to better coordinate those efforts. So from my perspective, I think we have pretty good coordination between the county and the state and between the county and different service providers. We have an open door policy. We're happy to talk to anybody anytime they have concerns, any of the agencies. And we have a very good monitoring relationship with them as well when we go out and look at their on-site operations to make sure that they're in compliance with our plan. If you have other suggestions, we're always looking for ways to improve. In fact, you probably saw in the slide that Doug showed, our homeless crisis response and housing plan includes a specific goal of continuously improving our homeless crisis response system to be as effective as possible. And every year we're looking at ways to innovate and streamline and coordinate funding and become more effective, because honestly we're trying to stretch a very little bit of funding as far as possible, and we have to be as efficient as possible in order to be able to serve as many people as we can.
Kirsten, maybe Mayor Wheeler would like to talk about the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council, the coordination of the elected official level.
Sure.
If you don't mind.
Yeah, not at all. So you don't want to talk to Mike?
Yeah, please. So we can get you on tape.
Yeah.
So thank you, Doug, and Kirsten and everybody else. It has been a very informative panel. And so we did commission a group to study affordable housing in Kitsap County, Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council Subcommittee. And, we all decided that each jurisdiction is different, but we should go back to our jurisdictions and highlight this is probably the most important issue that we're all facing. And so how Paulsville or Bainbridge handles affordable housing or even homelessness is going to be different than how Bremerton handles it. I can say that we did commit to a resolution to do this, and we also committed to utilize the state funds that we're going to have appropriated to us to devote to affordable housing resources. In the city of Bremerton, I can give you a snapshot of what we'll do. With the partnership of the Bremerton Housing Authority, we're going to double our housing eviction prevention and rental assistance program. This is something new that we started last year. We're going to double it from 100,000 to 200,000, which will help 65 to 70 households. We'll increase our weatherization program, and we will work on upzoning in our neighborhoods. And this is going to create substantial change. But the message I'm delivering, and maybe you can join me in that, is while we are going to change density and the way some of our neighborhoods look, there's still going to be neighborhoods, but what we'll maintain is what we enjoy today is still a diverse community where retirees on fixed incomes, college students, folks moving out of their home and getting their first job can still live in the city that they worked in and grew up in. And so that's the thing that this type of density and what we're working on can help us maintain. So it's just, I don't know if I answered the questions, Doug. We're working on a lot of stuff in the city, but the Regional Coordinating Council, the goal was everybody go back, just like I reported to you, and come up with solutions on what we're going to do about the issue.
Thank you so much, Mayor. I see we have Commissioner Garrido in the audience as well. Commissioner, would you like to make any comments about coordination between jurisdictions?
Good morning, and thank you for having this wonderful panel this morning. It's a great topic, and it's a really important one for all of us to be talking about. The Regional Coordinating Council has been talking about affordable housing for quite some time, and it does need to be escalated, I believe, and increase the conversation. But one of the things that I think comes out of today is we have a room full of really talented people who have been making some excellent suggestions. And I believe that continuing this conversation as a workshop, rather than simply as very impressive speakers, would increase our ability to actually encourage additional ways to address homelessness in Kitsap County and to reach success. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. We have 2 more questions, and then, and I think we're getting a little bit towards the end of our time. Do you want to ask your question? And then we'll do our 2 more questions and then wrap it up.
Would it be possible, or have you already considered, a navigator kind of position who could visit the Kitsap County cold weather shelters? Because, you know, we keep people from freezing to death when they come in, when it's 32 degrees or lower, or it's rainy, or those other triggers. But then they leave at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we see them, and we know that they're back on the streets, and possibly will be back that night if it's triggered again to open. But it seems like while they're there, and I've seen the same ones coming and get to know them, that would be the time to address, like, do they have mental health issues? Do they have, you know, substance abuse? Is it a problem? Are they veterans or whatever? And, you know, some people I know are resistant to coming in, but there are lots of people that I've been talking to that really want a place to live.
Yeah, thank you. Good idea, for sure. One that was talked a little bit about at the end of the last severe weather shelter season. I think one of the challenges operationally is that the severe weather shelters are open at very unpredictable times. We don't know when or how often they're going to be open, so it's fairly difficult to employ somebody to come on an ad hoc basis to show up at 4 different shelters. I'm totally open to more brainstorming about how we might be able to accomplish it or how we might be able to fund it, so we can definitely talk more afterwards. But at first glance, it was just a little operationally difficult, and so what we were recommending to the shelter host organizations is that they immediately refer people to the Housing Solutions Center the next morning because they're really the experts in having all of the resources. But we can definitely continue the conversation. We have 2 more card questions, and then I think we'll wrap up.
So the one I have is 2 years of countless hours were spent on the tiny house village proposal. A location was found, buildings were constructed, and donated, building materials and labor were used. In addition, countywide meetings to educate and inform the public were held. What's happened? Many of the same things you're talking about today, like the services, were talked about for that. What is the difference between the 2? So the tiny house village, there was a church step forward with location. There was a volunteer organization, a faith-based organizations who built several tiny homes that are ready to go. The county changed some of their zoning policies for transitory accommodation zoning, so we are able to put it in certain places around the county. Right now, we're waiting for a not-for-profit agency to step forward that's going to do the property management portion of it. So we are still we had 2 meetings on that last week, so hopefully that will happen within the next few months. What the difference is, because these are 2 very different models. The tiny house village, these are people that are pretty, don't have the high needs that we see and that they will have in the navigation center. These are people that are almost self-sufficient. They just need a place to get to for short term that they can stay there. Several people in other tiny home villages we see around, they even have cars, they'll drive there. I think 40% usually have jobs. So it's not the level of people, it's not the level of intensity that we have that we anticipate at the navigation centers. The navigation centers, we have programs that we kind of judge on. We have Kitsap Connect project here, which basically works in the city of Bremerton. And those are the 30 highest utilizers that the Bremerton Police Department will see. They work with the case managers to try to get off the street. An example, we just met with them last week. We had one gentleman that had 70 arrests in 1 year. Non-violent arrests, but we're doing things here in the city of Bremerton. After he was with Project Connect he's been there for a year and they've got him off the street, he's had 0 arrests. So that's a group we're looking for.
Last question that we have time for today is this one. I am an AmeriCorps service member serving Kitsap County Welcome Home Project for clients coming out of Kitsap County Jail. Housing them on their first night out of jail is imperative. How will you be able to help this community, or will you, how will you be able to house them? I think we touched on this a little bit earlier with the first question around the challenges of finding programs that are willing to serve people who have criminal histories. I think there are some outreach programs into the Kitsap County Jail right now, including the Welcome Home Project. So we do have navigators from the Housing Solutions Center that do go to the jail on a weekly basis to try to connect people with services and housing before they are released. We have Kitsap Mental Health Services program that goes into the jail to work with people who will be leaving the jail and seeking mental health services. And we do have another program that goes into the jail that tries to enroll people in post-jail substance use treatment program housing as well. So we are in some ways able to help some of the population of folks who are coming out of jail. But I definitely see this as a really big gap in our community and something that we need much, much more of. I absolutely agree that it is critical to get people who are coming out of jail instantly into, as quickly as possible, stable housing. One of the things that we do in our division is coordinate the annual survey of people experiencing homelessness called the Point in Time Count. And as part of that effort, we voluntarily also send a couple of teams of people into the Kitsap County Jail once a year to talk to folks who have either experienced homelessness before jail or are anticipating experiencing homelessness when they're released. And we try to find out as much information from them as we can about why they were experiencing homelessness before they were put in jail, why they anticipate experiencing homelessness after jail, and what are the resources that they need to really help them. We know that a significant number of folks coming out of jail, being released here in Kitsap County, are very concerned about where their next housing is going to be. And I've heard many stories of folks talking about how they feel like jail has been an opportunity for them to potentially get a clean start and start fresh when they get released. But they have a lot of concern about not having a stable house to go to, and then feeling like they have no choice but to go back to the situation that they were in before. And they don't want to do that, but they don't know that they have, they don't feel like they have another opportunity or another choice. So I definitely feel like this is something that we need to work on even more intensively as a community, and I would definitely welcome conversations and ideas for how we might have a program that more specifically helps folks who are exiting from jail into our community to provide stable housing.
And Kirsten, the 110% did fund starting in January 1st, 2020, a transition coordinator that will work within the jail under the direction of Lieutenant Emily Klein. So whoever wrote this came up and gives me your contact information. I'll make sure the lieutenant gets it home to you so you can have access to that service.
I think that question is awesome because it's exactly why we need something like the navigation center in our community. We need a place for people to be able to go. And it's not just people leaving the jails, it's people that are leaving the crisis triage center. There's a place where people can go that are in a mental health crisis or a substance use crisis, generally stay there 4 to 5 days, and they need a place to go when they leave. Many of them are homeless. We need people to have a place to go when they're leaving substance use treatment centers. All of this is why the navigation center that Doug just presented is really, really a vital part of our continuum of services that we do in this community.
Thank you. I'm sorry we've kept you a few minutes over. As you can tell, this topic is really a big one and a very, very important topic. So we thank you so much to our speakers who were here today to present information about these really innovative and exciting programs that are at work in our community. A huge thanks to the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this event. Thank you to all of our elected officials in the audience who are supportive of trying to find more solutions to homelessness and affordable housing challenges. And thank you to all of you in the audience for coming today to listen to this forum and caring enough to want to be informed about what's going on in our community. The League asked me to please remember to fill out your evaluation forms and give them to a League member. They want to genuinely know what you thought of this event and how we can improve in the future. If you are interested in getting involved directly with homelessness efforts, one of the ways that you can do that is by becoming a severe weather shelter volunteer. You've heard some allusions to the Severe Weather Shelter Program. This is a program that is run completely by volunteers with a little bit of support from the Department of Emergency Management and our division. It operates 4 emergency shelters that are only open when the weather is extremely cold or snowy or wet. They do an amazing job, and they last year collectively were able to provide more than 1,000 safe stays for people in our community, and they're always looking for volunteers. So if you're interested in volunteering, you can also find that information on our website. We just started the severe weather shelter season yesterday, and it extends to the end of March. So we need lots of volunteers to make sure that we can get it staffed up every time that there's a need due to really severe weather in the community. Let's give our speakers one last round of applause.